Welcome, everyone, to yet another installment of AFF-CMY's pre-conference interview series. I am Shemin Busy. Today, I'll be interviewing Dr. Shango Blake. Known as the nation's hip-hop principal, he works to encourage youth to fulfill positive lifelong goals. So let's see what he's going to be discussing at this year's conference.
So I'm Dr. Shango Blake. I'm the executive director, co-executive director of NYC Speaks, which is the largest civic engagement initiative in the history of New York City. It consists of really looking at issue areas that are important to New Yorkers. So everything from housing and neighborhoods, climate and infrastructure, education and youth development, workforce development and economic vitality, health and wellness, racial justice and equity, all of these different issue areas, arts and culture. And what we did was that New Yorkers got together in a private, as a result of a private public partnership. And we developed a survey that was actually, this is what makes New York City Speaks interesting. This survey was developed by New Yorkers for New Yorkers. So I call it the FUBU of research. We had organized ourselves into civic policy councils. And in these civic policy councils, we had New Yorkers from diverse lived experience, diverse expertise, diverse neighborhoods, diverse ethnicities. And they were the ones that were responsible for developing the questions, the research questions that would be presented to New Yorkers around the areas that I had mentioned before. And as a result, we had over 62,000 New Yorkers actually respond to the survey. Out of the 62,000 New Yorkers, 18,400 were young people between the ages of 14 and 17. The ultimate goal is we're now in our community conversation phase. We're looking at the data, the findings. We're having conversations in communities that are often underserved in Harlem, Brooklyn, Brownsville, Far Rockaway, areas that we would say are traditionally marginalized or not really engaged and feel a sense of disenfranchisement. These areas are where we're having the community conversations and we're looking at the data and making sense of it. So now we're in the qualitative aspect of our research. And it's just so powerful that from the beginning to end, it's really involving New Yorkers at every stage, from the development of the questions to the canvassing in terms of going out into the communities, to the actual now looking at the data and making meaning of it. And I'll just cut short that the ultimate goal is to take all of this research, both quantitative and qualitative, and develop into action plans that will be delivered to the Eric Adams administration and the city council around these are the actions that New Yorkers think that you should take. These are the top policy concerns of everyday New Yorkers. And so it's a way to bring us bring New York, create participatory relationships between New Yorkers and the government and the New York City mayoral administration.
You're doing, the workshop is called Empowering Black Children. Why did you feel that this was an important topic to bring to the conference this year? What are you going to be talking about?
I'm president of Black Influencers United, which is an organization of Black educators, community leaders, parents, and civic groups. And our vision is that we serve Black educators, we influence others, and we impact Black children. We understand that systemic barriers and implicit bias exist within educational systems, and that they often don't serve our children well. And we can just look at all the indicators, the achievement gap, the high suspension rates of Black boys, the over-representation of Black children in special education, the underrepresentation of Black children in gifted and talented programs. And so this is something that is part of my belief system, and I represent an entire group throughout the 5 boroughs of New York City who are fighting against these things and coming up with real meaningful solutions and alternatives.
Then my last question, real quick, how did you get involved in all this? Why did you feel advocating was so important and getting involved in something like this?
My father grew up in, before it was called foster care, but he grew up in, I guess, what would be considered now group homes and in shelter systems based upon my grandmother, who at the time had a mental breakdown. And at the time, they didn't understand mental health. And so she spent her life in mental institutions. They performed lobotomies on her and all these different things. And then the ultimate thing was that it led to the disintegration of my father's family, where each one of his brothers and sisters were put in placement. And so not only did he lose his mother, but he lost his siblings simultaneously. And so he always tells me the story about what he went through. But it was inside these agencies that he met someone who impacted his life. And he went on to become a college professor, community activist, a leader on a national scale. So I know the power of what people in agencies can do to either help or harm our children. And so for me, this is not something that I walk into this work that is just like I read a book and said, this is what I think should happen. It comes from a deeply personal place. It comes from a set of core values that are rooted in my family history.